coming up on Network Africa. Ex-President Paul-Henri Sandaogo Damiba, accused of murder plots on Burkina Faso's President Ibrahim Traoré, is expelled from Togo to Ouagadougou. Tunisia's capital grinds to a halt as floods force schools closure and emergency response. Plus, United Nations reiterates warning against violence to warring parties in Sudan. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Joke Rogers in Lagos. We begin here in West Africa, where Togo has arrested and extradited Burkina Faso's former leader, Paul-Henri Sandaogo Damiba, to Ouagadougou following accusations that he plotted to assassinate the country's current military ruler. Mr. Damiba seized power in a coup in 2022, but was himself overthrown 8 months later by Captain Ibrahim Traoré. Burkina Faso's authorities accused the former leader of masterminding an assassination against President Traoré as part of a wider plot to destabilize the state. Togo's Justice Ministry confirmed that Mr. Damiba was handed over on Saturday, saying Burkina Faso guaranteed his safety, dignity, fair trial, and that he will not face the death penalty. The military government has also charged him with embezzlement of public funds, corruption, illicit enrichment, and money laundering. The former leader has not publicly responded to these allegations. Authorities in Tunisia have suspended classes in schools and universities after heavy rainfall triggered widespread flooding across the capital, Tunis, disrupting transport and daily life. Cars are stranded on submerged streets, businesses forced to close as residents wade through floodwaters, and civil defense teams carry out rescue and drainage operations. The torrential rains have affected several parts of the country, particularly northern and central regions, causing flash floods and rising river levels that inundated residential areas and major roadways. President Kais Saied has visited the city of Meknasi in Monastir Governorate to offer condolences to the families of 4 people who died in flood-affected areas. The president also ordered the National Army to assist emergency efforts, including clearing roads, pumping out floodwaters, and supporting affected communities as recovery operations continue. In the meantime, days of heavy rain have triggered widespread flooding across southern and central Mozambique, affecting more than 600,000 people and causing severe damage to homes, roads, and health facilities in Bairro Ferroviário. Houses and streets have been submerged as residents wade through floodwaters searching for salvageable belongings. Victims say they have lost everything, with many left without food, shelter, clothing, or blankets, as entire neighborhoods remain underwater. The United Nations Humanitarian Office reports that rainfall levels since October are nearly double the annual average, worsening an already dire situation. Mozambique's disaster agency says at least 50 people have been killed since the end of December as emergency teams continue rescue and relief operations in affected areas. More warnings from UN humanitarians who say that the catastrophic flooding in Mozambique is causing massive disruption to lives and livelihoods across the country, increasing the risk of disease and exposing urban areas to crocodiles. The head of the UN Aid Coordination Office in the country, Paola Emerson, told reporters in Geneva that more than 500,000 people have been impacted by the floods triggered by heavy rains in the first weeks of the new year, and the numbers keep rising as extensive flooding continues and dams keep releasing waters to avoid bursting. Mozambique's Gaza province is most affected, along with Maputo and Sofala provinces. She was speaking from Jai, Gaza's capital, stressing that 90% of the country's people live in houses, that's makeshift houses, which are earth-based structures that basically melt after a few days of rain.
More than 500,000 people have been impacted by recent floods across southern and central Mozambique, particularly in Gaza, the Gaza in Mozambique, Maputo and Sofala provinces. The numbers keep rising as extensive flooding continues and dams keep releasing water to avoid bursting. 90% of the people in Mozambique live in adobe houses that basically melt after a few days' rains. Health facilities, roads, and critical infrastructure are also impacted. So far, the most affected province is Gaza, where I am today, with 64% of the affected people. Nearly 5,000 kilometers of roads have been damaged across 9 provinces, including the main road linking the capital, Maputo, to the rest of the country, which is currently inaccessible. As a result, supply chains are severely disrupted. Continued water releases are expected to remain a threat even after heavy rains subside. From just one dam, up to 10,000 cubic meters of water were being discharged. That is approximately 25 times the amount of water that could be held in the press briefing room you are in today. Every second. You cannot imagine the strength of this water and the impact it has on people and the infrastructure.
Of particular concern are waterborne, or is the combination of waterborne diseases and malnutrition, which can often prove lethal. Even before the recent floods here in Mozambique, around 4 out of every 10 children were experiencing chronic malnutrition. And so this renewed disruption to food supplies, to health services, and to care practices threatens to push the most vulnerable children into a dangerous spiral. We can prevent disease, deaths, and irreversible losses to children, but we need to act fast. Mozambique is really a country of children and young people. More than half its population, around 17 million people, are under the age of 18, and the average age is just 17. And when floods and cyclones strike, as they have repeatedly and with increasing frequency over recent years, it's the youngest and children who are hit hardest.
Let's get more on this. Joining us now is Channels TV correspondent in Johannesburg, South Africa, Innocent Samosa. Innocent, it's good to hear from you in such dire situations across southern Africa, where flooding has affected several countries, including South Africa itself. Paint us a picture of what's happening on the ground right now. Just how widespread and severe is the flooding across the region?
Indeed, Joke, a very good evening to you and our viewers around the world. It's good to be with you. The South African government has declared the national state of disaster. We do know now the number of people who have sadly passed on. The number is 30, and search and rescue operations are currently taking place in and around Limpopo province and Mpumalanga province. We do know that the South African National Defence Force is indeed part of the operation to really look for the people who, might be missing. But we know that one of the search and rescue operation that we're hearing about is that the 5-year-old child that has gone missing is also, being one of the people that are being, looked for in that particular province. But it has been very devastating, for a lack of a better term, and we now know that the families in Limpopo province and Mpumalanga province are now trying to rebuild their lives. I'm told, in fact, this happened in my hometown in Bushbuckridge in Mpumalanga. I was talking to my mom earlier, and she told me that the rain has now subsided. People are now picking up the pieces, but she tells me that infrastructure is being eroded. Infrastructure is nowhere to be found, which is indeed going to be a challenge for the government to really bring it back to normal. Kids have not been able to go to school. Some people have not been able to go to work because bridges are full. So that's where we are at the moment. The people in that region are really trying to pick up the pieces and get back to life as normal. Joke.
So we're seeing unusually heavy rainfall across the region. From last year, to what I understand, to what extent is climate change contributing to the intensity and frequency of these floods?
Indeed, Joker, these are seasonal rains. In fact, during spring into summer here in South Africa, we normally have rainfall, which of course it is the low pressure that comes from the Indian Ocean. We're told that is climatical factors and contributing factors, as you rightly indicated too. This includes the issues around climate change, erratic, effects to that. So it is a rainy season, but few weeks from now, Joke, I can tell you that we'll be out of the rainy season. We'll be going into the cold winter. But this time around, I can tell you that it has been pretty much devastating because it does seem as though the government did not really anticipate that the levels of water levels will be pretty much devastating to many communities in the country, Joke.
Right, and as I can imagine, emergency services are stretched at this time in many of the affected areas, with search and rescue operations still ongoing. How effective have government and disaster management responses been so far, and where are the most urgent humanitarian needs?
I think it has been pretty much challenging for them, but I can tell you now that they really done well in terms of um, uh, uh, responding swiftly to this challenge. And we are seeing the South African National Defence Force coming into the party to really, try to assist with rescue operations. But it's also important, Joket, to mention that one of the people that are being wanted is the MMC. This is the mayoral committee member in Johannesburg who was in Mozambique and his team. He was swept away by these floods. And we know now that he's not been found, him and the team. So they're still looking for him. But also, the premier of Limpopo province, Popi Ramathuba, told the media earlier that the extent of the devastations goes into around 2.4 million US dollars to really fix issues around infrastructure damage, hospitals, clinics, schools, electricity. Some people have not had electricity. It's been 4 days now. Kids have not been able to go to school. So we're told that for that to happen, for that operation to happen, they need around 2.4 million US dollars. And it does seem as though it's not going to be easy for the government to really cough out that money. It's going to be challenging, but it is for a good cause. I guess that money is available in the reserves of the country. But I can tell you now that she was speaking with a heavy heart, saying that this was indeed devastating for her province. Joke.
Indeed, and looking beyond the immediate crisis, what long-term measures are southern African countries prioritizing to reduce flood risks and better protect vulnerable communities?
So the government, that is the president of South Africa, said that they will need to calibrate a meeting with the SADC region leaders to really put together a mechanism that will withstand these kinds of challenges. But it's going to be interesting again, Joke, because we're living in a world of in a geopolitical fragmented world. And in this case, I'm talking about Botswana. You know that Botswana aligns with the United States policies. And we know that President Donald Trump pulled out of the Paris agreement that speaks to the issues of climate change. So it's going to be interesting to see whether or not, when this meeting is being held, Botswana will participate or not. But it would be important for them to really participate in this meeting, even if they don't believe in it, because it does seem as though it's a way to find a solution and to better prepare the region for such kinds of disasters. But they've not told us the date. It's just a plan on the table that the president of South Africa, that is Cyril Ramaphosa, said that there's a need to really sit down as the leaders of the region to really find a way to mitigate against these kinds of events. Because as you rightly indicated in your intro, in Mozambique also, there have been heavily battered by this floods. In fact, we have around 300 businesses in Mozambique that are operating, but now they're shut down because of the flood. So it does go that far where it affects business, it affects the economies of the region. So there's a need for them to really find a way to collaborate, some sort of a mechanism to really deal and mitigate, this challenging climate economic times.
Well, our condolences to all those affected across southern Africa. Innocent, thanks again.
Thank you, Jockey.
And still to come on the program. It's cash and land rewards for Senegal's Lions of Teranga as President Faye celebrates the AFCON trophy. Details soon. Please stay with us. Welcome back. The United Nations is reiterating its warnings that atrocities committed during the capture of El Fasher in Sudan's North Darfur must not be repeated elsewhere in the country. Speaking at a UN press briefing in Geneva, the UN Human Rights Office urged parties to the conflict to prevent similar violations in the city of Kadugli and Dilling in South Kordofan. The warning follows a 5-day visit to Sudan by UN High Commissioner for Human Rights Volker Turk, which ended on Sunday. UN spokesperson Ravina Shamdani said Turk witnessed firsthand the trauma suffered by civilians displaced by the fighting, particularly at an internally displaced persons site in northern state sheltering about 20,000 people.
Regardless of their affiliation. The UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Volker Turk, on Sunday ended a 5-day visit to Sudan with a stark warning to the parties to the conflict. The horrific violations and abuses committed during the capture of El Fasher in North Darfur must under no circumstances be repeated in Kadugli and Dilling in South Kordofan. During his visit to Sudan, and in particular to the Al Afad site for internally displaced people in Adabba in northern state, which is sheltering some 20,000 displaced people, we bore witness to the trauma and the reverberating impact of the brutality that children, men and women have suffered in El Fasher as they attempted to flee. The capture of El Fasher in late October was characterized by widespread summary executions, the use of sexual violence as a weapon of war, dehumanizing treatment and abductions for ransom. The offensive was preceded by a suffocating 18-month-long siege that prevented civilians from getting food, access to health and other basic needs, with constant attacks on residential areas and civilian infrastructure. The High Commissioner urged all parties to the conflict, including in a meeting with an RSF delegation on Sunday, to ensure that the crimes committed during and after the takeover of El Fasher are not repeated in Kadugli, Dilling, and the wider Kordofan region. Safe passage must be ensured for civilians who leave areas of active conflict. They must be protected from summary executions, sexual violence, reprisal attacks based on alleged collaboration, arbitrary detention, and abductions. All parties to the conflict need to ensure that forces allied with them or under their control act in accordance with international human rights and humanitarian law, including, crucially, by repressing such violations and holding those responsible for violations and abuses to account regardless of their affiliation. Throughout the course of this conflict, all parties have perpetrated gross violations and abuses of international human rights law and serious violations of IHL, notably when the fighting intensifies to bring new areas under the control of one of the parties. Having witnessed the destruction of critical civilian infrastructure at the Merowe Dam and hydroelectric power station, the High Commissioner said the RSF and the SAF must cease intolerable attacks against civilian objects that are indispensable to the population, including markets, health facilities, schools, and shelters. They must ensure the protection of civilians and unimpeded access for the delivery of humanitarian aid.
Uganda's opposition figure Kizza Besigye is said to be critically ill and his health is deteriorating. The 69-year-old politician is at a private medical facility under heavy security. According to his party, the People's Front for Freedom Party, they've not specified what he's suffering from. Prison authorities have denied Besigye's health is dire and say his overnight visit to a doctor was a general checkup. The former personal doctor to President Yoweri Museveni and one of his longest-standing political rivals. He has been detained since November 2024. Let's turn our attention to Malawi, whose energy sector has hiked petrol and diesel prices by more than 40%, marking the second time fuel costs have gone up in 4 months. A statement from the Malawi Energy Regulatory Authority said the fixed pricing system of the previous government was unsustainable and had led to significant losses. President Peter Mutharika, who returned to power last year, has been trying to revive Malawi's ailing economy. However, Malawians say Tuesday's fuel increase could harm the president's efforts and worsen the cost of living crisis for many people. Family of the DRC's first Prime Minister, Patrice Lumumba, on Tuesday attended a court hearing in Brussels as legal proceedings linked to his 1961 assassination moved forward. The family's lawyers say that the court will deliver its decision on March 17 after reviewing what he described as a complex and extensive case file. The legal team has welcomed the fact that the case has finally reached a judge more than 16 years after the initial complaint was filed. Patrice Lumumba, who became the country's first prime minister in 1960, was overthrown, arrested, and killed less than a year later during the Congo crisis. Senegal's latest heroes, the Teranga lions, have paid a formal visit to the country's president following their return home. Addressing them, the president, Faye, paid special tribute to Sadio Mane, saying a player whose journey, attitude and leadership command respect, a player who throws his talent, but above all, through his sense of responsibility, left his mark on his final and this entire competition, added that today Sadio Mane is much more than just a player. The players will be getting a substantial reward package to mark the historic achievement in Morocco. Each player has been assured to receive 75 million CFA francs, along with a 1,500 square meter plot of land in the coastal area of Petite Côte. Additional rewards have been located to the Senegalese Football Federation, the accompanying delegation and the Ministry of Sports. Captain Kalidou Koulibaly expressed his gratitude to the people of Senegal and to head coach Pape Diop, whom he describes as the compass that guided the team to victory.
Aux autres membres de la délégation, 500 mètres carrés et 20 millions, toujours sur la Petite Côte.
And just before we go, did you know that there are 54 countries as well as quite a few disputed territories in Africa? Sudan used to be the largest country in Africa until it was split into Sudan and South Sudan, making Algeria now the largest African country, and that's by geographical area. And now you know. That's Network Africa. Thank you for watching. I'm Joke Rogers.